This is Land of Havilah, Psalm 94. It's 23 verses. Verse 1. Yahweh, you God to whom vengeance belongs, you God to whom vengeance belongs, shine out. Rise up, you judge of the earth. Pay back the proud what they deserve. Yahweh, how long will the wicked triumph? They pour out arrogant words. All the evildoers boast. They break your people in pieces, Yahweh, and afflict your heritage. They kill the widow and the alien and murder the fatherless. They say, Yah will not see, neither will Jacob's God consider. Consider, you senseless among the people, you fools. When will you be wise? He who implanted the ear, won't he hear? He who formed the eye, won't he see? He who disciplines the nations, won't he punish? He who teaches man knows. Yahweh knows the thoughts of man, that they are futile. Blessed is the man whom you discipline, Yah, and teach out of your law, that you may give him rest from the days of adversity until the pit is dug for the wicked. For Yahweh won't reject his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. For judgment will return to the righteous. All the upright in heart shall follow it. Who will rise up for me against the wicked? Who will stand up for me against the evildoers? Unless Yahweh had been my help, my soul would have soon lived in silence. When I said, my foot is slipping, your loving kindness, Yahweh, held me up. In the multitude of my thoughts within me, your comforts delight my soul. Shall the throne of wickedness have fellowship with you, which brings about mischief by statute? They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous, and condemn the innocent blood. But Yahweh has been my high tower, my God, the rock of my refuge. He has brought on them their own iniquity, and will cut them off in their own wickedness. Yahweh our God will cut them off. Comment, that's the end of the psalm. It's a prayer that God will take vengeance against the wicked, especially when they prey on the vulnerable. And toward the end, it's an affirmation that he will. God sees what the wicked do and will indeed execute justice. He'll cut them off. But he'll help the righteous and uphold them when they call out to him. Yah in verses 7 and 12, YAH is a shortened form of Yahweh. In verse 1, vengeance belongs to Yahweh. God said in the law of Moses, long before the Psalms, vengeance is mine, Deuteronomy 32:35. Vengeance belongs to Yahweh, therefore vengeance isn't for us, Romans 12:19. In verse 5, the wicked afflict God's heritage. God's heritage is his people, Isaiah 19:25. It's also translated God's inheritance. God created the world with man in focus. God will destroy the present heavens and earth, 2 Peter 3:7, but he'll retain his people from it, Revelation 21:3. His people are his everlasting possession, Exodus 19:5. Since God's people are so important to him, it's a travesty that anyone afflicts them in verse 5. He's sure to take notice of it in verses 9 to 11. He hears, sees, and knows what's happening. He knows every man's thoughts in verse 11. How much more will he see what men do? In verse 12, blessed is the man to whom Yahweh teaches his law. If God didn't teach his word to us, it would remain closed to us. Speaking of Jesus and the disciples, quote, then he opened their minds that they might understand the Scriptures, Luke 24:45. Blessed is the man Yahweh teaches out of his law in verse 12 of the psalm. And blessed is the man whom Yahweh disciplines in verse 12. Yahweh's discipline and teaching will give a man rest from adversity, so the man can bide his time in relative comfort until the pit is dug for the wicked in verse 13. Quote, that you may give him rest from the days of adversity until the pit is dug for the wicked, end quote. In verse 15, judgment will return to the righteous, meaning a righteous final judgment is coming. God will see to it. In verses 16 and 17, there's no one except Yahweh to rise up for us against the wicked, who will stand up for us against evildoers. If not for his help, our soul would have soon lived in silence, meaning we would have soon been dead. In verse 18, quote, when I said my foot is slipping, your loving kindness, Yahweh, held me up, end quote. When we think we're slipping into some disaster, God saves us. In verse 19, in the multitude of my thoughts within me, your comforts delight my soul. Disturbing things swirl in our heads sometimes, but the thought of Yahweh reassures us. In verse 20, the throne of mischief brings about mischief by statute. It's a virtual law or statute in the mind of the wicked that they must be wicked. Satan himself has that law. He only comes to steal, kill, and destroy, John 10:10. He sticks to that law. It's mischief by statute. But never mind about all that in the closing 2 verses. God is my high tower, the rock of my refuge, and God will deal appropriately with the wicked. Psalm 95 is next.